Welcome to Microsoft Dynamics GP2013 Module 3, where we cover processing of payroll. We have talked about payroll setup, HR setup, we covered setting up an employee, and we covered setting up an employee in HR as well. So now we are prepared to process the payroll for our employees. What we will cover in this module overview is the pre-posting reports, the default setup, a build, calculate, print, check, and post of a payroll process, generating our direct deposit ACH file, and last, voiding of checks. The first setup I want to show you is the pre-posting reports. We talked a little bit about them in setup, but I just want to remind us where we go to set those up and the information that displays on those if you want to use them, as they're most important when we process payroll. So if we go into Microsoft Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Posting, and Posting. And I'm going to process a computer check run, but we choose a series of payroll, and you can see this is going to be in there for manual checks, period end reports, and also your void checks. But we'll focus on computer checks today. So if we expand out, we want to remember that anything that does not have PPR on the back would be when you post your payroll, all your posting reports. If it has a PPR, that's print before posting. So if we want to see any of our check registers to be printed prior to posting, then we would mark these options PPR. What I see a lot of customers do is mark the option of PPR more frequently than the reports after posting, because we can reprint those at any time. So mark your options for print before posting, and you can see I have a few of them marked. I would also recommend to turn on your build check file exception, because I will demonstrate for you the critical errors that will pop up on this new build exception report in GP2013. And I would unmark the deduction in arrears report, DIA deduction build. It's usually a report that many customers don't need, and it's less prompts for you when you process payroll. And last, at the bottom, there's an option that I will demonstrate that talks about duplicate checks. So you could turn on this report and warning, as it will warn you if you're going to print any duplicate check reports. Next, what we're going to cover is default setup. So there's a lot of default setups that I want to point out about payroll, so it'll help you with these defaults on that will make your payroll process go more smooth and quicker for you. If we go back into Microsoft Dynamics GP, and if we go back into your payroll setup, which I'll go to my setup navigation list and click on payroll. We covered some of this in Module 1 with our payroll setup, but again, our defaults for our checkbook ID. So I'm defaulting in my payroll checkbook ID. My check format, if I'm actually printing checks, you're going to want to put in your check format. The continuous means a docked matrix printer. Normally you're probably choosing single feed for your laser printers for your checks. And then the other option is your alignment forms. I would recommend you to change this to check earning statements, unless you're actually going to print an alignment form every time you process payroll. So change your options in here for check your earning statements. Another setup that I want to show you to make our processing of payroll go a little bit smoother is in the build checks window. There's this default ID. You can see I have one called regular, so this is my regular payroll. You name them whatever you want, but you would set up default IDs for each payroll you're going to run. So for example, if you're going to do salary weekly, you might have a default for your salary employees on your weekly. So you can just pull up this default ID, all your deductions and benefits come with it, and then you're ready to run payroll. It just would save a lot of time if you have your regular default IDs set up compared to what you're running for payroll. The next process we're going to cover is the entire payroll process. So we build our checks, we calculate, print checks, and post. What I'll talk to you about in this process is how we can look at just the critical errors and stop them before they really cut any checks to save us time. We talked about the default alignment. I'll also show you how to edit your payroll distribution. So if we find a general ledger account that is incorrect, we can edit it on the fly and continue on with our payroll without removing our build. And last, we'll discuss mandatory arrears. So to go ahead and start with our payroll process, we are going to begin at the transaction entry. Now, most of our customers, they could be importing in their transactions, not many key transactions today. So your batches may come in with Integration Manager, eConnect, or a time clock system. However, your transactions are imported in. But they'll come right into this batch window. So once your transactions are imported in, even you can still make corrections. So the payroll person can review the batch information and make corrections still at this point because we haven't started processing payroll. I want to click on the options and show you a quick way. If we are keying sometimes transactions, maybe we're going to key in a bonus batch or key in all my hourly employees is the one I will demonstrate. You can use enter by, let's say, code. So what that does is I'll go ahead and create a weekly batch. I'm going to go ahead and add this batch. You can name your batches whatever you want. You can reuse your batch IDs as well. I also want to point out that you can make this a reoccurring batch. So if you have transactions that are happening every week or every other week, you can make it a reoccurring batch. So once you post payroll, the batch is still there and you can edit these amounts. So think of that if you don't want to constantly be keying transactions that you use over and over. You can make it a reoccurring batch. But in my example, I'm just going to use this as single use. So once I post the payroll, my batch will be gone. So I'll go ahead and click Save. And I'm going to pull up Ackerman. And I'll choose the hourly employee. So watch what happens here. Now, if I want to quickly create a batch of all my hourly employees, if I just tab through, it's going through all my employees that are hourly and entering in the default hours for the semi-monthly. You can go through and change those, but that's just a quick way. I mean, I did them very quickly. You might tab off, change your hours, tab off, but it brings up every employee that's hourly, and that's just an easy way, and you can do that with any type of pay code or example. There's also in these options, use entry defaults. So if you mark a pay code as an entry default, it would be the same thing. It would be tabbing through all the ones you have flagged as entry defaults. So once we have all our transactions keyed in or imported, again, we can make changes to this. Because I have my pay rate turned on in Payroll Setup, I can also change my pay rate right here on the fly. So if some of these were imported incorrectly or they received a raise after the import, we can go ahead and change your pay rates and your amounts or your hours right in this window. We can also add, you can mix information into the batch. So you could have a bonus or a commission line item. It doesn't have to all be hourly. So we have all our batches entered or imported in. We can print an audit report as well. The next step is to build your checks. So this is your main start of your payroll process, is what we call build, calculate, print, and post. So I showed you the default IDs. I'm going to show this edit one because I have some specific sample data to show you on the error report first. So this is a regular payroll. You put in your pay period dates, and you can run payroll for a group of class. So example, if you have a department as a class, you could run from this department admin to this department admin and just run that group of employees. So class and employee ID are the only ranges that we can run payroll with when we're talking about all our employees, all our active employees. So I'm going to choose Edit. And if I click on Include Deductions, this is where you're going to include your deductions in a payroll. So I'll insert a few of my deductions, and these will save with your default ID. And then I'll click on Benefits. I'll choose a few benefits as well. And then I'm going to click on Batches. So you can include multiple batches in your payroll. For this one, I'm going to choose my hourly batch and try to process payroll with my hourly batch. I'm not going to include my salary at this time. So I'll go ahead and build. And this is the warning because we did set up post-dated pay rates in Module 2 for our employees. And do I want to continue with the build? Which I do. I won't activate them right now. And do I want to save changes to my default ID? I do. So we'll go on. And this is because of when we set up position control and warning us about excluding people that are not in our current assigned seats. And do I want to exclude those? And at this time, I'll just say no, I want to include them. So this is my billed check file report. And here's the new report to Microsoft Dynamics GP2013. It's called the Billed Check File Exception Report. So I want to demonstrate that one because usually customers would have maybe a 50-page billed report depending on how many employees they have. So that billed report could get quite large of all our employees, and it's very difficult to find our warnings and our critical errors in the billed report. So what we created in GP2013 was the Billed Check File Exception Report. And on that report, it is going to kick out just your critical errors and your warnings, and will help you get your payroll process faster, fix the errors, and continue on. So I want to show you that report. So here's my build, which I'll just expand that. You can see I got a lot of errors, but it's difficult to thumb through all of those. This one's a pretty small one. So here's our new report. And here it's showing you the critical errors. And when you run payroll, you cannot process payroll with any critical errors. You can process payroll with warnings and continue on, but payroll will not run with critical errors. So we need to fix all of these critical errors. And it's telling me that the tax record does not exist for these employees at this time. So that's a critical error. I can't process payroll if I don't know their federal filing status. So that's demonstrating how we're showing you critical errors and warnings down to one page on this Billed Check File Exception Report. And that was new to Microsoft Dynamics GP2013. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to remove that build because I just wanted to demonstrate for you all those different error messages. We'll go ahead and show my regular payroll I'm going to run. I'm just going to run a payroll for this employee, Ackerman. He's salary. And if you remember in our setup, whenever we mark salary, salary employees do not have to key in transactions except for their exception time of vacation and sick. So since he's salary, I'm not going to key in a batch or enter any transactions. And Ackerman, he worked the full 86.67 hours this week. So if I have salary marked, I'll just double check my deductions. I have some selected and benefits. I'm not going to include a batch this payroll. We'll go ahead and click on Build. Again, we're getting a warning on our post-dated pay rates. I'm going to continue. And here's our exclude these transactions, which I don't want them excluded. So here's my build report. And here's my exception report. I'll run those to the screen. So my build is showing you kind of what's included. Most customers may skip over this and really cut to the calculate, which shows me my gross to net to make sure payroll is correct. But this is showing you I'm trying to take out these benefits and deductions. Here's my check file exception, which you can see that there's nothing wrong with it at this time, which is great. So now I'm going to go ahead and calculate my checks. I don't have any warnings or errors. I'll go ahead and click OK. And I'll run this to the screen. And usually this is one that because your next step is going to be printing checks. So we have to make sure everything is correct at this point. Also notice that it says check posting register PPR. Those are those pre-posting reports I turned on, and I'm going to run that to screen so you can see it as well. So here's my calculate checks report. You can see I'm making $1,000 in gross. I have a couple benefits in there. I have some deductions, and then there's my taxes. So at this point, if we see something wrong with the employee, like maybe there's a missing deduction or the taxes are incorrect, we need to remove the build, fix the employee record, and then go back and build and calculate. If everything looks okay, then we can go ahead and go on and print our checks. So at this step, we want to make sure everybody in our payroll process is correct. Now this is that check posting register. So it's already calculated all my GL posting accounts. And this is a big concern for customers that we typically might have, especially at the beginning of an implementation, we might have some general ledger accounts that are going to places we did not think they were going to go to. So I notice on here that I have a general ledger account that is incorrect. Instead of having to remove your build, fix it, and then build again, I'm going to show you how to edit this on the fly. That is what's nice about printing these pre-posting reports, is we can see the general ledger accounts that we are posting to, and if we need to make corrections, we can do so at this time before posting our payroll. So I'll go ahead and close out of this, And since we've calculated, it's calculated all of our general ledger accounts. So I'll go down to this item right here, Posting Edit List. It's kind of hidden into our process. So I'll go ahead and click on that and choose Redisplay. Now it's bringing in all my general ledger posting accounts, and you can see that this 2150, I've identified that as a problem posting account. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to the 2164. That's the correct posting account it should go to. Right there, I've just edited on the fly to correct the general ledger posting account. So now when I post my payroll, it will continue on and post to the 2164 account. What we need to remember is to change our posting account setup as well when we're done with our payroll. Because this incorrectly defaulted in, we'll need to make a change under our posting setup, and maybe it was a department we added or a position and we forgot to get that into the detail in the posting. So any changes we make here, we want to take note of to change in our posting account setup. Now that I've corrected that account, I continue on with my payroll. So I did a build, calculate, print checks. If we are accruing in HR, we would want to click the accrue button, and that will accumulate all our accruals for vacation and sick. So right in that process, we want that done before we print checks because we want the vacation and sick time to print correctly on your checks. My next option is to print checks. So I am running direct deposit. We made that active in Module 1. So I can go ahead and calculate my direct deposit. There were no exceptions, which is great. Notice how my check format defaulted in for me from my payroll setup. It also defaulted in as checks instead of alignment because we set that up in the payroll setup as well. We have our starting check number, which you can still change at this time, and then we have our check date. So the check date is what prints on your check, your actual check, and then we also have a posting date, and the posting date in general ledger will always be what updates, your posting date in payroll is what updates general ledger. So you can have a different check date and posting date. This date right here is what's going to be on your NACHA formatted direct deposit ACH file. So if you wanted your ACH date to be a different date than your check date, we do give you that option with these two date fields in this window. So I'm going to go ahead and click checks and choose print. Here's that warning we did in setup. Duplicate checks exist for this range of check numbers. Do you want to continue? So at this point, I'm telling you that we're going to run with a duplicate check, which we try to avoid in payroll because if we have duplicate checks, you cannot void that check later on. So we added these warnings in Microsoft Dynamics GP2013 so you don't post payroll with duplicate checks. It's usually something very common that customers don't want to do. So that's why we're warning you. But in this case, we can hit cancel and it would print a report, but I'm going to go ahead and continue. So we do allow you to continue on if we're in a rush with our payroll. So I'm going to go ahead and run my checks to our screen. And because Ackerman is a direct deposit employee, I have no checks to print because I'm printing with earning statements, and earning statements can print on blank paper. So you can see right here, it didn't default in as default. It defaulted in with print my earning statement. This is my earning statement number. So I'll go ahead and hit process. I'll run these to screen so you can see them. This is a default out-of-the-box earning statement. What is really nice about it is you can print these on blank paper. So a lot of customers, when they're running direct deposit, they run with the earning statements, so you can print them on blank paper. If you're using some type of portal where you display your checks on your screen, then you can go ahead and cancel out of these and not print anything. So it's your option. You run it to screen and then cancel out if you really don't want to print anything. So if we look at this earnings statement, we have the shading in there. These are modifiable in Report Writer as well. You can change it up, but this is my default out-of-the-box report. We have our vacation and sick time down here, my direct deposit account information, my deductions, and my benefits print on my check as well, and my taxes. So pretty common format for our earnings statements. A lot of customers like them. So I'll go ahead and close that out. And this is already the last process of payroll. Pretty easy. So now we're at posting. And this is, again, the last step. So once I click on the post button, everything is updating your payroll and your general ledger and your bank rec. So this would be the time we have to make sure we have backups. We want to make sure that everything is exactly how we want them. If we still see a check that is incorrect, we can remove our build and start over. So nothing has posted any of the payroll tables as of yet. But as soon as I click on process, that is what will happen. I want to show you a little trick in this window. There is an option called create deposits. And if you're running short on time, maybe things are still printing at the printer and you need to get that file to the bank, clicking on create deposits and then choosing process will throw the batch file into the generate window so we can create our file to the bank quicker without leaving this post window. Because what I would recommend is there's an option in here to reprint checks. I would not leave this window until all your checks have printed and you've gotten them off the printer. Because as soon as I post, I cannot reprint checks. And a common in support will get calls that say, I need to reprint 50 of my checks, the printer jammed, how can I get back to it? And there is no way to get back. So I highly recommend that to make sure you get all your checks off the printer if you are printing checks prior to leaving the post window. So I've printed all my checks. I'll go ahead and click on the post button and choose the process. This is posting to all your payroll tables, general ledger, and bank rec. Here's our posting journals, which you can print them. I'll just run them to the screen. Some save them in a file. They're all able to reprint your posting journals as well. I'll just cancel out of the direct deposit one. So this is running through all the payroll processing, and now here's all my payroll posting reports. So this is the check register. Every time you post a payroll, it's going to have an audit trail code of UPR, that's for your payroll posting. Computer check is for CC, and then this will increment. So this payroll is 82, your next payroll will be 83. When it's UPR VC, that's for void check, and MC is for manual checks. That's kind of what the cryptic symbols are for there. Here's my gross pay, my deductions. We also have our FICA Medicare on here, and employer and employee. A lot of customers asked us to add that on there. So we add your employee and employer FICA, Social Security, Medicare, all split out for you. So then when you have those employees that make over $200,000, you can see that difference in the totals down at the bottom. You can also see over here an indicator of a D. That means this employee was on direct deposit. You wouldn't see that if I was on getting a check. And here's some of that posting register like we saw before. And you would determine which ones you want to print and show and run for you. So now I showed you some of the critical errors, the editing of the distributions. Let's go ahead and create our ACH file that we want to send to our bank. And this is a Notcha formatted file that gets created automatically when you're processing payroll. So right down our process, we printed checks. We can now click on the Generate ACH because everything is posted. And you can see here I have my one batch sitting here waiting for you. If it's a payroll day and you have multiple people processing payroll, when you come in here, you'll have multiple batches. So if Julie and Terry were processing payroll for multiple batches, you might see 4 or 5 builds in here. So you would want to click on them all probably and include them in the ACH file. Because some banks do charge you each time you transmit a file, so you wouldn't want to do each one separately. You would want to mark them all and then click on Generate, so it's all included in one file. So this is all my employees on direct deposit. I can mark this. The ASL was the Include Auto Set Align, which I did not have turned on in my setup. And once I do this, I can click on Create File. It tells me the ACH file has been created, and it prints me a transmittal. You want to make sure not to send this transmittal file to the bank because that's just a summary of what's going on. Remember when we had our payroll setup, we saved it to a secure location on our server. And right up here, you'll want to go ahead and grab that file, and that's the file you send to the bank. As long as you do not delete or have delete build after use, these will stay in here. So if something happens on the file or it gets deleted, you can come back in here and create them. I would recommend after a month to come in here and probably just delete them all if they're older builds, because sometimes with this window and the scrolling, a user might include a previously payroll accidentally and put that into their accounts because this is the file that goes into their account. So I would recommend to maybe delete off after the last month. There's really no need to keep all this information in the window. There are some direct deposit reports down here if you want to run, a direct deposit register, the account master. Any of these type of reports are all pulling from the direct deposit tables. One more process in our payroll processing is also the mandatory arrears. And so when we were marking some of our deductions as arrears possible and then mandatory arrears. And so what the mandatory arrears process is you want to run this as you're all done processing payroll for all your payrolls. And it'll go through all your employees. You can see I have a template set up. And it'll go through all your employees based on the deductions I marked down here and tell you who was not paid in this payroll. So what's nice is if you're in healthcare or an hourly type situation where your employees don't work from week to week, this will go through all 1,000 of your employees and tell you who did not work this payroll. It kicks them out, and for those deductions we had flagged as mandatory, you can hit process and it will put them in arrears for you automatically. So then we know to take that deduction 2 times next payroll. So the mandatory arrears is really nice when you have a lot of employees that maybe aren't salary and we need to watch those deductions. Last we want to cover is the void check process. So sometimes we are going to have to come into an account where we have to void our payroll checks. If it's not all checks or one of the checks, there is a void option when we are in the post window. But let's, for this example, just say we need to void one of our payroll checks because there was an error in that check. And we've already sent it to the bank. So in my transaction window, the void option is right here. And I'm going to go ahead and choose my payroll checks and my check and posting date. And if I hit redisplay, this will bring up all my checks. So here's all the different checks I have that I can void. Now, as we talked about before, if I choose one of these checks and choose to void it or choose to process, if it doesn't allow me to, it's telling me that that's probably a duplicate check number. So that's why we're trying not to post duplicate check numbers, because it doesn't know to void this check or the other check that has that check number. So we can mark which one we want to void. We can mark multiple as well. And we click on the process button. This will come up with those posting registers as we did before. I'll just print a few of them and then cancel out. And so now it's basically the same thing. You can see over here UPRVC for void check, the posting date, and then it's backing out everything that we posted for that one employee. And that's all there is to the void check, and it would back out all our information. The last item I want to show you is the manual check. And with a manual check, that is kind of used for if we need to make adjustments in the system. Maybe we noticed that our FICA wages were not updated correctly, or I didn't have a pay code marked a state taxable wage, and so I need to fix that amount. Anytime we need to make adjustments to an employee record but not cut a check, we would want to do this in the manual check window. If we're making what we call one-sided transactions, the gross to net does not equal out, which usually is the case, we would not put it in a batch ID. I'll just go to one as an example. I'm going to choose Employee Ackerman. I click on Transactions. Your check date and posting date is the month you want it to affect. And I'll just choose, for example, FICA Social Security tax, because maybe I want to adjust my wage. The amount is going to be your Social Security tax withheld. In this case, I don't need to adjust the withheld, but I do need to adjust my wage. I need to increase my Social Security wages by $500. You can also do negative amounts in here. So if we need to reduce something for incorrectly tax shelter deductions, we can do that as well. This EFIC is your employer portion. So we have employer portion for Medicare and Social Security. So depending what you need to adjust, you can adjust your employee portion or your employer portion. So that's basically a manual check, and you can go ahead and hit save, close out of this window and post, and it's going to post that amount. If I cancel out, all my posting reports print. So if ever we need to make any type of adjustments to the system, I would do that through a manual check, and then you have all your posting reports. And I'll just show you the audit trail code right there as well, UPRMC for manual check. So what we learned in Module 3 is about processing payroll. We talked about how to use the new default setup in Microsoft Dynamics GP2013 to make your processing go faster. We also looked at editing a general ledger account, a distribution on the fly to fix something that was posting incorrectly. We looked at how to process a payroll with direct deposit active and how to generate the ACH file. And we talked about the pre-posting reports and looking at those, and so we can identify incorrect general ledger posting accounts. And last, we talked about the voiding of checks and how to process that and manual checks.